Welcome back to part two. So, John uses this money that he uh, exploits from his nobles and their tenants to create this English Navy. In part, he uses the Navy, and this is John, to invade Ireland in 1210. 3 years later, he sends the Earl of Salisbury, and Earl is a title of nobility. So just a nobleman. This would be under a blanket term of the barons. He destroys in 1213 the Earl of Salisbury, a French armada poised, ready to invade England and the British Isles more generally at Dam, which is in France, obviously, since it was a French armada. So another reason that the barons might have done what they did, stopped supporting the king, raised arms in rebellion, which again was not something you did to your king back in those days, was the way that the Navy was funded through these means that I was talking about just a moment ago, through taxation, through strain on the nobility and their tenants. You have to have money left over after you pay your taxes to feed yourself, your family, to put clothes on your back, to keep a roof over your head. And if you can't do that, then you got a problem with whoever's ruling you. So the barons denied their support for John's continental ventures. No more. We're not raising any more taxes. We're not raising scutage. No more fees. No more gold for you, king. We are exhausted. The treasury's empty. So this delays John's return to the continent until 1214. So following the success of the Earl of Salisbury in repelling the French invasion at Dam, John goes and launches an invasion of I can barely speak English, as you probably already figured out. Poitou, in France. So he's in France fighting, trying to get his land back. And these Lusignan, who are just a group of Frenchmen, just a group of, you don't need to remember the name for the test. They were persuaded to switch allegiance to John. They were persuaded to fight for the English, but when they were needed most, they refused to fight. So they took the money. So John's allies, they were defeated by Philip of France at the Battle of Boivines. Again, I can't even speak English hardly. It is right here. Remember this name, certainly. This is critical. This is really kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back and leads directly to the rebellion and Magna Carta later on. So remember Boivines or Bouvines. And if anybody knows how to correctly pronounce that, please feel free to get in touch with me, and I will correct myself. So John manages to patch up a truce. John manages to retreat to England, but he is stained by this thought that he's a big coward because he had to retreat, even though in this instance it wasn't really his fault. So the loss at Boivines, again, I beg your pardon, shattered John's authority and paved the way for Magna Carta. Again, this is a big deal. This is a big important point. Remember the name and remember why it's important. This is certainly going to be a test question. All right, so the rebels start to gather. So John loses at Bovines, and they take their opportunity. So they choose Robert Fitzwalter as their leader, and Robert Fitzwalter is arguably no better than the king. He called himself as the leader, the marshal of the host of God and the Holy Church. Little bit of an ego, in my opinion. Could just be me. And this is supposedly, I'll get myself out of the way here. This is supposedly a rendering of Fitzwalter on his horse in battle and his chainmail and all that. So there you go. So Fitzwalter, not really all that much better than our errant king. So on 3rd of May, 1215, the rebels say, all right, king, you're on. Get ready to rumble. But these guys are also just a very minor movement. It's not the majority of the nobility that's even doing this. It's Fitzwalter and a few disgruntled, not a few, but some disgruntled noblemen. Why else really would they choose a man such as this, more on him in just a second, to lead a movement? He was not a great man. He had many grudges against the king. Didn't really want to follow the law. Didn't really care for customs. So King John, before all this happens, tries his son-in-law for murder. Robert Fitzwalter turns up in the courtroom with 500 armed knights, says, son-in-law, come with me. We don't have a problem here. Not really a guy I would look to for leadership myself, but again, could just be me. And he'd been prominent in plots against King John in 1212. So most of the barons didn't really want to get too terribly mixed up or involved with this guy. You can't really blame them. So what did the barons do to solve this problem? They did what families would do up until Henry VII took the crown from Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field. I'm an English history aficionado. So the son would go to fight for the king. The father would go to fight for the rebels, or vice versa. So whatever side won, the family would be on it, and therefore hopefully avoid punishment by whoever turned out to be victorious in the fight. So these rebel barons, they had all these demands, again, like taxation, like fair taxation, or let's, at least discuss taxation before you impose it upon us, and freedom of meaning you have to what I'm trying to say is you have to have a trial before you can just be summarily sentenced to something. And this developed from what's called the Unknown Charter from the reign of Henry I. So this Unknown Charter, again a precedent for Magna Carta, he issued, Henry I, this coronation charter in 1100. And Vincent, again, don't worry, it's just the name of the scholar who wrote the article that I put this together off of. So Henry I's coronation charter is of particular significance to the story of Magna Carta, since it was used as a model by the barons of 1215 for the concessions sought from King John. So we can go back even further. We can go back to 1100 to look at some of the precedents for what we have in the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the other things that we discussed earlier, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as well. So Vincent suggests Henry, and again, you don't need to remember Vincent. Henry pledges himself to a degree of moderation. He discusses fines. He discusses inheritance rights. He discusses the freedom of the church. Again, should ring a bell from the good book here. Henry promises in this charter to not destroy, why would I say that? To restore the laws of St. Edward the Confessor, another former king who was canonized later, buried in Westminster Abbey. Those photos I was showing you earlier that I took, they don't let people into his tomb to see his tomb. It's so old, it would damage it. So, and he was going to take away all the bad customs by which the Kingdom of England had been unjustly oppressed. So these are big promises, very big promises for anybody to make. Take away all the bad customs. Restore the laws of Edward the Confessor. Well, I suppose that would be an easier thing to do. Fines, inheritance rights, freedom of the church. One man to do all this? Well, that is what they wanted. So the barons gathered together. The barons marched on London. They attempted to take Northampton Castle. It failed. They got to London. Somebody forgot to tell the people inside Baynard's Castle in London that Fitzwalter was persona non grata. He was still the captain of the castle. So, he gets there. Hey, it's me, Captain Fitzwalter. Open up. Oh, okay. Marched in. Took London. Put the king's back quite literally against a wall. John had to, at this point, negotiate with them. And that led to the sealing of Magna Carta at Runnymede in June of 1215. And this is Runnymede. It is quite literally kind of marshy fields along the River Thames. Now, it's lost to history. It's a park in England. I didn't get a chance to visit, but it's somewhere in this area that the document was sealed. It's lost to history exactly where, but it is a park. So somewhere around here is where it happened. There's a monument. There's even a monument to JFK somewhere around here. But it's where that happened. So did the charter mean much to either side? No. King John saw it as a stalling action. He wanted to regroup, re-energize his forces, take on the rebel barons once again. And the rebels, to the rebels, it probably meant as much, because the rebels reneged, which means they went back on their agreement to surrender London after, shame on me, after the sealing, not the signing. Magna Carta was sealed. Shame on me. This really demonstrates how much they disdained the proceedings at Runnymede, how much they didn't like it.